games are expensive, and more games are launching either unfinished or in less than ideal states. Naturally, it's becoming more and more worthwhile to wait until games go on sale before buying them. But the vast majority of reviews that you'll find for games are at or before release. If you're like me, there are certain games that you're interested in, but for whatever reason, don't want to pay full price for them on day one. This is exactly how I felt about Black Myth Wukong. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming the game is on sale, and you want to know whether it's worth picking up. Well, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. I'll be breaking down my spoiler-free review into story, game design, gameplay, and presentation, and then my final thoughts about the game. And one last thing before we get into the actual review, I play this game on PS5 Pro, and any gameplay you see in this video was captured on a PS5 Pro in balanced mode. Okay, let's kick things off by talking about the story. As a brief spoiler-free setup for the story, you play as a silent protagonist known as the Destined One, a lesser-known monkey whose goal is to collect 6 relics to revive the spirit of the great sun Wukong after the events of the classic Chinese novel Journey to the West. Your quest involves adventuring across various regions, facing off against numerous fearsome demons known as Yaoguais that are inspired by Chinese folklore. The story of Black Myth Wukong exceeded my expectations in some ways, but at the same time isn't the main factor that I would consider when deciding to buy this game. What do I mean by that? Well, basically, I personally didn't think that the story itself was particularly compelling, and it wasn't the main driver that kept me playing the game. So if you're buying this game looking for a rich story full of twists and turns and captivating character arcs, I unfortunately don't think you'll be satisfied here. However, that being said, the storytelling, which is to say how the story is presented throughout the game, was outstanding. A lot of the story is delivered through unique animated video sequences that play at the end of each chapter, and these were absolutely fantastic. And honestly, something I looked forward to throughout my playthrough. I particularly enjoyed how unique each animation style was. The story is also divided up into different chapters containing largely independent stories that have their focuses on a specific set of characters. As a result of this, naturally some chapters have more interesting stories and are paced better than others. Overall, the story definitely leans more towards spectacle than substance, which of course isn't necessarily a bad thing, but also probably means that you're not going to be in a situation where you can't put the controller down because you can't wait to see the story through to the end. Now let's talk about game design. This is where things get a little interesting. First of all, I've seen a lot of discourse of how this game is more like a God of War game than a Souls-like game and vice versa. I can see why those comparisons are being thrown around, and in truth, this game sits somewhere in between, as it borrows elements from both types of games. But personally, I think this game is going to be more appealing to those who like Souls-like games. The reason for that is that the thing that's going to keep you progressing throughout this game is the different boss fights you discover and different combat abilities you can unlock throughout the game. In many ways, these two things seem like two of the central pillars of the design of this game, having cool boss fights with cool combat abilities. If that appeals to you, you're going to have a great time with this game. I was so impressed with the sheer number and variety of the different boss fights in this game, as well as the pacing with which you encounter them. In addition, the game gives you a variety of tools for combat, not necessarily through weapon types, but through different spells and transformations that can be unlocked throughout the world and upgraded through your skill tree. I won't say that there are endless combinations of builds or anything like that, but more than enough to keep things fresh throughout the playthrough. And the game encourages that, allowing you to freely respec your skill points at any point in time. In terms of world and exploration, as I mentioned earlier, this game is divided into different chapters, and each chapter is given its own isolated region that you progress through. Each region is largely structured as a collection of small areas with linear corridors connecting them, with the exception of one of the later regions, which was shockingly different from the rest of the game, but I don't want to spoil anything here. There can also be secrets tucked away in corners, but for the most part, these regions seem intentionally designed to have you progress in the direction that you're supposed to go. One thing that I found neat was that each region has its own side quest or objective, usually through an NPC that you discover in that region that can unlock a secret area. These secret areas then have a special boss fight with some of the best rewards in the game. I thought that was a neat incentive for exploration. With that being said, if you are a completionist or want to experience everything that this game has to offer, this is going to be one of those games where you want to have a guide with you. There is a good amount of stuff here that's easy to miss. You could argue that maybe this is a result of poor level design, and I largely wouldn't disagree with you. The biggest issue is that the size of the maps aren't equal across chapters, leading to some areas and chapters feeling a bit overwhelming or fatiguing. Overall, the game draws elements from Souls-likes and other action games, but it's effective at the best parts, which are the combat and boss fights. Speaking of which, let's talk about the gameplay. This, of course, is an action game, and the primary thing to talk about is the combat and the enemies. I think the combat here is very solid. You don't have a wide variety of different weapon types as you primarily wield a staff, but you do have access to different stances which change your heavy or special attack options, and I think there's a good mix here, and I found each of the stances to be viable for different scenarios. Spells and transformations are what really makes this game's combat feel different. There's a good variety, but you can only have certain ones equipped at a time, which led to me primarily sticking with specific ones for the majority of my playthrough. There were two primary standouts to me. The first is the Immobilize spell, which when casted at the right time can literally freeze your enemy in its tracks, allowing you to get in a decent amount of hits for free before the spell wears off. It makes for a visually striking effect, but it's of course very good as well. The other spell was called A Pluck of Many, which allows you to generate duplicates of your character that can then all start attacking the enemy at once for a period of time. There are also spirits and transformations. Transformations allow you to fully transform your character into certain bosses for an extended period of time with their own unique skills and combos. Spirits are more like spells that briefly transform you into a specific enemy type that then performs a particular action. There are a good amount of transformations in the game and a staggering amount of spirits you can find. However, you can only have one of each equipped at a time, and unfortunately I don't think that they're well balanced, as I found myself primarily using the same 2 or 3 throughout my entire playthrough. Okay, let's now talk about the boss fights. These are the main attractions of the game in my opinion. If you've seen any trailers or other coverage of this game, you've probably seen the spectacle of some of these boss fights. I personally think this is where the game shines. There are an impressive amount of different bosses and mini-bosses in this game, and the actual big bosses of the game, like the final bosses for each chapter, are just as big, memorable, and epic as you would expect. For me, one of the best parts of this game was the anticipation of seeing what crazy boss was waiting for me around the corner. Very reminiscent of Souls-like games. In terms of difficulty, unfortunately there are no options here. The game isn't crazy bang your head against the wall difficult, but it is challenging, and there were a few bosses that did give me some pushback and required me to modify my build and approach to defeat them. I actually found the game to be more difficult earlier on, but as I progressed, learned the mechanics, unlocked more abilities, I personally found the difficulty to ease up noticeably. The gameplay and boss fights from the early trailers of this game were what originally caught my attention, and I personally think they more than lived up to my expectation. Really impressed with what's on offer here for this type of game. Alright, let's wrap this up by talking about the presentation. It's easy to see from one look at this game that this game is visually stunning. Again, I played this game on PS5 Pro in balanced mode, and it's easily one of the best looking games of this console generation, in my opinion. The environments, the bosses, the effects, everything here is striking. Unfortunately, the one big stick in the mud for this game is the performance. And it seems like even 1 year later, there's still a lot to be desired here. I'll be honest, I'm not the most sensitive person when it comes to frame rates, but even I experience moments here and there where the performance impacted my enjoyment of the game. Particularly certain boss fights, where a lot of things were happening on screen at a time, I would experience noticeable slowdowns. I don't think it would prevent me from recommending this game, but it's definitely something that detracts from the experience for sure. Particularly on the PS5 Pro, which promises 4K 60 experiences, this game unfortunately does not meet that mark. To summarize, I think this is a game that's absolutely worth playing if you're a fan of action games, Souls-likes, or anything of the sort. To me, if you have any interest in games of this genre, this is a great game to buy on sale. And honestly, if you're a big fan of these types of games, it may even be worth it at full price. This game first caught my attention with the very first trailer they put out around 5 years ago. I remember at the time everyone thought that this game looked fake or too good to be true, but now having played it, I feel like it largely delivered on that original promise. And I'm excited to see what this studio makes next. Alright, that'll do it for this video. If you like the content, leave a like, it really helps, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.